Picture this. You wake up on a Monday morning and before your feet touch the floor, your mind is already in overdrive. Deadlines at work, tension in relationships, money worries, that talk you keep putting off. Your heart races. Your chest tightens. And you haven't even left the bed. Familiar? Here's the truth most people miss. You're not broken. You're not weak. You're simply human, living in a world seemingly engineered to rob you of peace and sap your optimism. But what if I told you there's a hidden switch inside you, a quiet key that can convert that inner storm into a calm, restorative refuge? This isn't another surface-level pep talk. We're going to explore 15 transformative strategies that rewire your brain, reshape your routines, and give you steady inner calm. These aren't abstract ideas. They are proven methods that have helped millions reclaim control of their emotional life. By the time you reach the end of this series, you'll own a complete toolkit for staying steady in chaos and emanating positivity when life pushes back. So get a notebook, settle into a comfortable spot, and let's start this change together. Here's a paradox that might surprise you. The more you struggle to control absolutely everything, the less in control you feel. It sounds backward, but hear me out. Many of us live like we're directing a film when we are only supposed to be the lead actor. We drain ourselves trying to manage our jobs, our partners, other people's opinions, the weather, traffic, the economy, even the stream of thoughts in our own heads. The harsh reality is that the energy you pour into trying to govern the uncontrollable only increases stress, anxiety, and overwhelm. Think of the last time you were stuck in traffic. You probably felt your blood pressure climb, gripped the steering wheel harder, maybe honked or switched lanes desperately. Did any of that make the jam move faster? No. You only made yourself miserable while sitting in the very same congestion. Now picture the same traffic, but instead of resisting it you inhale deeply and tell yourself, this is outside my control. I can use this time to catch up on a podcast, try a breathing exercise, or enjoy a few minutes of quiet reflection. Same gridlock, completely different experience. Real serenity doesn't come from micromanaging every detail. It arises from understanding the boundary between what you can influence and what you cannot. Here's a practical exercise that changes how you face stress. Imagine two circles around you. The inner circle contains everything you directly control, your thoughts, your choices, your reactions, the way you treat others, what you eat, how you invest your time. The outer circle holds everything beyond your control, other people's decisions, the past, unforeseeable events, the economy, other people's judgments. Most people make a basic mistake. They devote nearly all their mental power to the outer circle, while neglecting their inner domain where real influence exists. They worry about whether the boss likes them instead of delivering excellent work. They fret over what might happen next year instead of making wise choices today. They try to change a partner's personality rather than improving their own communication. Flip the script and something remarkable happens. When you concentrate on the inner circle, your influence expands organically. Focusing on being your best self improves the environment around you. Controlling your responses often changes how situations unfold. Shifting energy away from forcing outcomes and toward consistent effort and a constructive attitude tends to produce better results. I learned this the hard way during an intensely stressful stretch of my career. My boss was unpredictable, the company was shifting, and I felt like things were unraveling. I spent months trying to predict every turn, attempting to sway decisions that were not mine, and losing sleep over hypothetical scenarios. Then one day I sketched those two circles and honestly listed what I was worrying about. I realized that nearly all my mental energy was spent on things beyond my control. I decided to focus only on what I could influence, doing my job well, keeping a positive mindset, building good rapport with colleagues, and preparing myself for whatever might come. Within 3 months I was promoted, not because I tried to manipulate the outcome, but because I concentrated entirely on how I showed up. The promotion was great, but the real reward was the peace I felt during those months. Instead of being consumed by future anxiety, I was present, effective, and genuinely calm. This principle is universal. In relationships you can't force someone to love you, but you can choose how lovingly you behave. In your career you can't guarantee promotion, but you can control the excellence of your work. In health you can't change your genetics, but you can control your daily habits. The liberation of accepting what's outside your control is profound. You stop wasting energy on unwinnable battles. You stop replaying past conversations you cannot alter or rehearsing future scenarios that may never occur. You sleep better, think more clearly, and feel calmer. This does not mean becoming passive or abandoning your dreams. It means channeling effort where it matters. It means learning to be strategically calm instead of randomly reactive. Now let's talk about gratitude, but not the cursory kind. Most people assume gratitude is a quick checklist of nice things, then they're done. That's fine as a start, but it won't create deep, enduring positivity. Transformative gratitude is about finding value in the shadows. Think of Sarah, who lost her job during a downturn. Initially she was devastated after 12 years at the same company. She was frightened and angry about bills and supporting a family. Then she shifted her question from "what did I lose?" to "what can I be grateful for in this circumstance?" Odd as it sounds, unemployment gave her a break she hadn't had in more than a decade. She'd been slowly eroding inside a role that drained her, staying because it felt safe. That forced pause allowed her to reconnect with family, rediscover neglected passions, and reassess what she wanted professionally. 6 months later she launched a consulting business aligned with her interests. 2 years on, she earned more than she had as an employee and worked with clients she enjoyed. She called getting fired the best thing that ever happened to her, but she wouldn't have seen it that way if she hadn't learned to look for hidden gifts in difficulty. Revolutionary gratitude trains your mind to seek lessons, growth, and unexpected benefits in hard moments. It isn't about pretending pain is good or denying real loss. It's about cultivating the habit of spotting usefulness and meaning in adversity. Try this each evening. Don't only list pleasant things. Ask 3 questions: what difficulty did I face today and what did it teach me? What went wrong and how might that have protected or redirected me towards something better? Who frustrated me and how did that person help me practice patience, empathy, or strength? Instead of writing "I'm grateful for my health," you might note "I'm grateful for the headache this morning because it reminded me to hydrate and care for myself." Instead of "I'm grateful for my family," you might write "I'm grateful for the argument with my team because it shows they feel safe expressing themselves and it reminded me to listen more." This perspective trains your brain to uncover opportunity in every situation. As you practice, fewer scenarios feel truly devastating. That traffic jam becomes a chance for quiet thought. A boss's criticism becomes helpful feedback. Rejection becomes redirection. I once worked with a man named Mark going through a bitter divorce. He believed his life was ruined. I asked him to find 3 things he could be grateful for about the divorce. He thought I was crazy, but over weeks he started seeing the shifts: independence, learning to manage his life, reconnecting with friends, rediscovering abandoned interests, and important lessons about communication and compromise. 6 months later he said he wasn't glad his marriage ended, but he was grateful for who he was becoming. That's the power of this practice. It doesn't change what happened, but it drastically alters how you experience it, turning you from a victim into a student of life, always harvesting lessons. Revolutionary gratitude also includes appreciating ordinary, often overlooked gifts: waking up, your heart beating without effort, access to clean water, the sky above, the capacity to learn. Noticing these basics builds a durable contentment that doesn't rely on external success. You'll begin to see how wealthy you already are in non-material ways. Your emotions are like weather. They shift and pass. You can't fully control them, but you can navigate them. The mistake many make is treating emotions like identity: I am angry, I am sad. But you are not your emotions. You are the observer of them. Anger, fear, sadness are temporary weather in the landscape of your awareness. Shifting to an observer stance is the core of emotional resetting. It's the difference between being inside a storm and watching it from a warm, safe room. Here's a fast, powerful reset called the stop method that can change your state in under a minute. Stop the momentum the moment you notice a negative emotion by saying stop silently or aloud. Take a breath using a paced pattern that signals relaxation. Inhale slowly through your nose for 4 counts, hold 4, exhale through your mouth for 6 counts, letting the longer exhale trigger your body's relaxation response. Observe the feeling with curiosity instead of judgment, wondering what triggered it and what it's trying to tell you. Proceed intentionally by choosing a helpful response rather than reacting automatically. Practice this in low-stress moments so it's available when storms hit. Emotional resetting is also about savoring positive feelings. When joy, gratitude, or love arise, pause and soak in the sensation for 20 seconds. Take a mental photograph. That's making a deposit in your emotional account, so you have reserves for tough days. Research shows the physical part of an emotion typically lasts about 90 seconds. If it persists beyond that, you're likely feeding it with stories. This is empowering. If you can observe without fueling the narrative, the intensity will decline. I used this during a presentation when I noticed anxiety rising after a data mistake. Instead of catastrophizing, I named the feeling, breathed, corrected the error, and continued. The anxiety faded in minutes and my composure impressed colleagues. You won't eliminate difficult feelings, but you can prevent them from hijacking your day. You can feel without being controlled. You are not your emotions. You are the witness noticing them pass. The inner narrative that runs non-stop in your head is the most consequential conversation you'll ever have. For most people, that internal commentary is a harsh, nagging roommate, constantly pointing out flaws, predicting failure, and undermining confidence. It tells you you're not bright enough, you'll never succeed, everyone is judging you, you always mess up. This voice is so familiar that you may not even realize it's there, much less that you can change it. The good news is that this critical commentary isn't your essential self. It's the echo of old programming shaped by parents, teachers, peers, cultural messages, and past hurts. The conscious, aware part of you can observe this voice and decide whether to follow it. The first step in changing your inner story is awareness. Most people live on autopilot with a running inner critic. For a few days, simply notice your self-talk, especially in stressful moments. When something goes wrong, what does your mind say? When you face a fresh challenge, what story does it tell about your odds? When you look in the mirror, what comments arise? Don't try to edit or suppress yet. Just notice. Awareness is the doorway to change. Once you can hear the existing story, you can begin to challenge its distortions. Most negative self-talk relies on cognitive sleights of hand, overgeneralization, catastrophizing, mental filtering, labeling, that wouldn't withstand simple scrutiny. If your inner voice says "I always ruin things," test that claim. Can you recall times when you succeeded? You'll discover the critic is telling a dramatic tale based on limited evidence. Replace global statements like "I'm a failure" with accurate, tempered observations, "I made a mistake and I can learn from it." Where your inner voice claims you're not smart enough, reply with "I'm growing and learning every day." When you think everyone judges you, counter with "Most people are preoccupied with their own lives, and those who judge reveal more about them than about me." Reframing negative thoughts is practical. David, a graphic designer I worked with, was paralyzed by imposter feelings. Every client revision triggered a chorus of self-attack: "See, you're awful, they'll discover you're a fraud." He began by writing down his inner critic's statements and then contested each one with evidence to the contrary. He slowly replaced the script with balanced, encouraging responses: "My work is improving, clients hire me because they see value in what I do." Within months his anxiety lessened, confidence rose, and his business expanded because he no longer sabotaged opportunities with self-doubt. Rewriting your inner story goes beyond rebutting negative thoughts. It's about intentionally choosing empowering narratives. Instead of living as a victim of circumstances, see yourself as someone who learns and grows from experience. Focus on strengths and progress rather than deficits. A practical exercise is to write a letter from your future self, the wiser, calmer person you're becoming. What would that version say to you now? What reassurance, perspective, or advice would come from that vantage point? This isn't mere positive thinking, it's the deliberate selection of a story that supports growth. Another vital practice is present moment living. Ask yourself where most of your mind time goes. If you're like most people, it's divided between two mental places, replaying the past or rehearsing the future. Rarely are we fully in the single moment that's actually here. How many hours do you spend replaying yesterday's conversations, regretting choices, or predicting next week's problems? Meanwhile, life happens now, children grow, chances appear, beauty exists. Peace and presence are found only in this present moment. Anxiety tends to be a future problem, depression often fixes on the past. Peace is rooted in now. The habit of mentally time traveling steals the only time you can act. Present moment living doesn't mean abandoning planning or goals. It means recognizing that your power to influence the future exists in present choices. You cannot change last week while standing in this one, but you can change how you respond now, and that shapes what comes next. A simple sensory anchor for returning to now is the 5-4-3-2-1 technique. Notice 5 things you see, 4 you can touch, 3 you hear, 2 you smell, and 1 you taste. Engaging the senses pulls you out of thought loops and into the body. Another practical habit is single-tasking meditation. Pick an ordinary activity, washing dishes, walking to your car, brushing your teeth, and do it with full attention. Notice textures, sounds, sensations. This turns mundane moments into restful anchors and trains your mind to settle into presence. If you struggle with constant future-focused thinking, remember that the present is where your choices happen. Use small, intentional practices to build your capacity to stay here. I once worked with a client who was so worried about her teenage daughter's future that she missed the warmth of the relationship unfolding now. When I asked how things were in the present moment, she realized their connection was strong and she was missing the opportunity to enjoy and strengthen it by being lost in worry. That realization shifted her focus and improved her relationship. Authentic self-expression is another foundation for inner peace. Suppressing your true thoughts, emotions, or creativity to fit in or avoid conflict builds internal pressure that eventually manifests as anxiety, depression, or explosive outbursts. Imagine your expression as a river. When it flows, life is vibrant. When you dam it, pressure builds and eventually forces an eruption. Your ideas, feelings, and creativity need outlets. When you allow them to move through you in healthy ways, you feel more alive and calm. Journaling is a powerful outlet, but not the tidy daily summary style. Practice raw, stream of consciousness writing. Set a timer for 10 minutes and pour whatever is in your mind onto the page without editing. Allow fears, frustrations, fantasies, and hopes to be written down without judgment. Externalizing thoughts reduces their charge and stops the loops that escalate emotions. Creativity is another channel. You don't have to be an artist. Creativity is the act of bringing something new into the world, cooking a meal with care, arranging your space, finding a novel solution. Maria, who was recovering from divorce, rediscovered painting and found it a bridge between inner turmoil and external form. The work itself provided a safe way to process complex feelings. Movement is a form of expression too. Your body stores emotions, letting them move through movement, dancing, walking, stretching, can release what's stuck. And, crucially, expressiveness includes honest communication with people you trust. Start small, share one true thought or feeling each day with someone safe. It could be gratitude, a small irritation, or a moment of vulnerability. Authentic sharing builds intimacy and dissolves the pressure to perform. When I first told a friend that a remark had hurt me, I feared backlash. The friend thanked me for my honesty and apologized, and the relationship deepened. Authentic expression encourages reciprocal honesty and creates more meaningful connections. Forgiveness is another powerful liberation practice. Many think forgiveness means excusing harm or letting someone off the hook. That's a misunderstanding. Forgiveness is not about minimizing wrongdoing, it's about freeing yourself from the continuing emotional cost of holding resentment. When you replay an offense, you're effectively allowing the past to control your present mood. My own experience with a business betrayal taught me this painfully. I carried anger for months, planning revenge, and replaying the hurt. The partner moved on, but I was stuck, losing sleep and energy. When I chose to forgive, not because they deserved it but because I deserved freedom, the obsessive anger loosened. Sleep returned and with it a sense of self again. Forgiveness is a process, not a single act. You may choose to forgive long before any apology or restitution occurs. The choice to release resentment is primarily for your well-being. Self-forgiveness is equally vital. Many people punish themselves for mistakes long past. That habitual guilt undermines self-worth and sabotages joy. Working with someone who had carried remorse for decades after a reckless college mistake, we reframed accountability versus self-torture. Accountability is learning, making amends where possible, and committing to change. Self-torture is endless punishment that prevents growth. When he forgave himself, he turned regret into purpose by volunteering to prevent similar harms in others. Your mistakes can become fuel for positive action rather than anchors of shame. Forgiveness also applies to small daily irritations. The driver who cuts you off, the colleague who takes credit, the friend who cancels, holding on to each petty sting builds a background resentment that robs peace. Practice the forgiveness breath. On irritation, inhale deeply, silently say I forgive you and I free myself from carrying this hurt, and exhale the tension away. This prevents accumulation and keeps your emotional ledger clean, preserving calm and energy for what truly matters. Boundaries are another science of inner calm. Living without clear limits is a fast track to burnout. Boundaries are not walls, they are guidelines that protect your time, energy, and values while enabling healthy relationships. People with poor boundaries often say yes when they mean no, take on others' emotional burdens, and allow manipulative or draining behavior to continue. Many were taught that boundaries are selfish, but healthy limits make sustained generosity possible. Think of the airplane instruction, put your own mask on before helping others. That isn't selfishness, it's practical compassion. Time boundaries are foundational. Your time is finite and determines life quality. Set clear availability for work calls, block time for personal priorities, and treat those blocks as real commitments. Say no to tasks that overextend you and protect your schedules. Emotional boundaries mean taking responsibility for your feelings without absorbing others' emotional chaos. You can be compassionate without taking on someone else's emotional load. Energy boundaries mean managing your exposure to people who drain you while investing in relationships that uplift you. That doesn't mean abandoning people in need, it means discerning between temporary help and chronic patterns of taking. Values boundaries protect your integrity. Don't compromise who you are to appease others. Decline gossip, speak up when a comment violates your principles, and refuse invitations that conflict with your ethics. Setting boundaries will provoke tests, some will resist, try guilt, or push back. Stay calm and consistent. You don't owe lengthy explanations. A simple "I'm not available for that," or "that doesn't work for me," often suffices. Remember, you teach people how to treat you by what you accept. Those who truly care will adapt, those who don't reveal their priorities. Daily reflection is a ritual that shifts living from autopilot to intentionality. In a world that prizes speed, pausing to process and integrate your experiences is a rare and powerful act. 10 minutes of structured reflection each evening changes how you navigate life. It reveals patterns, uncovers triggers, and helps you translate experience into learning. Instead of collapsing into bed with the day rushing past, carve out this time to become the author of your life rather than a passive character. Start with 3 core questions. What did I do well today? This trains your brain to notice wins and reinforces positive choices. What could I have handled differently? This reframing directs curiosity toward improvement instead of shame. What am I grateful for today? This keeps your reflection anchored in appreciation. Layer in emotional reflection, what feelings surfaced and what triggered them, and relationship reflection, how did you show up and where could you be more intentional? These insights let you set a specific intention for tomorrow. Keep it simple and consistent, 5 to 10 minutes is enough. Over time, reflection turns reaction into thoughtful creation. Life will test you. This is not pessimism, it's reality. You will encounter setbacks, losses, disappointments, and moments that unsettle you. The difference is how you respond. Mental resilience isn't about being emotionally hardened or pretending pain doesn't affect you. Real resilience is the capacity to experience hardship fully while still being able to recover, learn, and move forward. Picture a tree in a storm. The rigid tree snaps, but the flexible one bends and survives. Resilience is less about toughness and more about rootedness and adaptability. Building resilience is like building any other skill, it takes consistent practice and gradual challenges. You don't become physically strong by lifting your heaviest weight on day one. You progress through small, manageable increases. The same applies emotionally. Start with facing small stresses intentionally so you're better prepared when larger storms arrive. One key element of resilience is cognitive flexibility, the ability to shift your thinking when circumstances change. Rigid thought patterns that once served you, perhaps avoiding conflict to stay safe, can become obstacles in new contexts. Cognitive flexibility asks you to notice when an old strategy no longer works and to try alternative responses. This often requires humility and experimentation, letting go of methods that once delivered results and testing unfamiliar approaches. Meaning-making is another pillar of resilience. The capacity to derive purpose or learning from hardship transforms suffering from merely destructive into potentially constructive. Viktor Frankl observed that those who found meaning in extreme suffering were more likely to survive. This doesn't minimize pain or suggest gratitude for trauma, it simply points to the human ability to extract significance from challenge. Ask yourself how a current difficulty might prepare you to help others or what strengths it's calling you to develop. This shift from victimhood to meaning-making is powerful. I worked with someone who experienced a painful loss and later used that experience to support others facing similar grief. Their purpose didn't erase pain but it gave it direction and value. Emotional regulation skills are essential. These help you experience intense emotions without being controlled by them. Emotional resetting techniques fit here too, but deeper skills involve accurately labeling your feelings, which reduces intensity by engaging your rational brain. Instead of the vague "I feel terrible," try "I'm feeling overwhelmed and anxious about this deadline." The specificity gives you space for practical action. Recovery rituals also matter. Identify practices that restore your physical energy, emotional equilibrium, and mental clarity. These are personal: exercise, time in nature, creative expression, connection with supportive people, meditation, or simple restorative routines like a warm bath or reading. Use these rituals proactively, they're maintenance, not just crisis repair. Accept that struggle is part of growth. Our culture often promotes the myth of a smooth life as proof of having it together, and that myth makes ordinary challenges feel catastrophic. Reframing difficulty as normal reduces shame and strengthens perseverance. Resilience develops when you expect challenges and practice recovery. Over time, you'll notice setbacks losing their power to define you. Visualization is a practical, science-backed tool that leverages the brain's nature to rehearse possibilities. Most people use their imagination to replay worst-case scenarios, priming anxiety and avoidance. But you can deliberately use visualization to rehearse calm, resourceful responses. Because your brain forms neural pathways when you vividly imagine an experience, mental rehearsal prepares you to behave similarly in real life. Athletes do this constantly: swimmers visualize every stroke, golfers rehearse their swings, basketball players envision made free throws. You can apply the same approach to social interactions, presentations, difficult conversations, or stressful days. Effective visualization is specific and sensory-rich. Pick a situation that usually triggers you and imagine handling it exactly as you wish. posture, voice, breath, facial expressions, the responses of others. Engage sight, sound, touch, and even smell to make it convincing to your subconscious. Practice daily for 5 to 10 minutes. Consistency matters more than length. Try identity visualization too. Imagine yourself as the kind of person who embodies calm and positivity. How do they move, speak, and respond? Step into that identity mentally and feel the sensations of being that person. Over time your nervous system will start to follow the rehearsed pattern. Create a mental sanctuary you can visit when stress arises. Build a detailed safe place in your mind, a quiet beach, a mountain cabin, a lush garden, fill it with sensory details. This sanctuary becomes a portable refuge you can access in seconds to restore balance. You can also use visualization to release negative energy. Picture anger as a heavy stone you set down, or stress as muddy water you wash away. These symbolic acts help your mind let go. Daily habits are the backbone of sustained calm and positivity. The quality of your life is the sum of your repeated actions. Tiny, consistent behaviors compound into major changes. The mathematics of habit formation is stark. Improving just 1% each day compounds into significant progress, while small daily declines lead to erosion. The problem is our brains prefer immediate rewards, so we overvalue quick fixes and undervalue slow, steady change. Start with micro habits, actions so small they're almost impossible to skip. If you want to meditate, begin with 1 minute. Want to exercise? Do 10 push-ups. These minimal steps reduce resistance and create identity shifts. Once you're someone who meditates, you're more likely to continue. I transformed my own chaotic mornings by adopting one tiny habit: drink a full glass of water before touching my phone. That small act took seconds but established a foundation. After a month I added 5 deep breaths before checking messages. Eventually, over months, my morning routine grew organically into breathing, brief meditation, gratitude journaling, and light movement. The point is to start small and let momentum build. Replace negative habits rather than trying to extinguish them with willpower alone. If morning phone checking is the problem, build a desirable routine that occurs before phone access. Swap complaining with a practice of noticing one positive aspect in challenges. Replace rushing with mindful pauses between tasks. Mindful transitions, taking 3 conscious breaths between activities, keep you grounded throughout the day. Appreciation scanning 3 times daily for 30 seconds primes your brain to notice abundance and trains your default attention toward positives. Habits also include recovery rituals that restore you after setbacks. Identify what recharges you and integrate those practices regularly so you don't wait until you're depleted to recover. The compound effect of consistent tiny practices is enormous. You don't need perfection, just persistence. Miss a day and return without judgment. Letting go is an art. A large portion of human suffering comes from clinging to people, to past hurts, to imagined futures, to identities that no longer fit. Letting go doesn't mean indifference. It means releasing attachment to specific outcomes while staying engaged in life. It means rowing your boat with the current when appropriate rather than fighting every wave. Attachment to outcomes creates narrow vision. I once invested heavily in a project I'd envisioned precisely. When reality diverged, my instinct was to fight harder. The harder I pushed, the worse things became. The shift occurred when I loosened my grip on the original blueprint and remained open to alternate paths. New options revealed themselves and what unfolded surpassed my initial vision. Letting go amplified possibility. Past hurts are heavy because we replay them, essentially living in memory instead of the present. Letting go of the past means extracting lessons and then releasing the emotional charge. A practical exercise is a gratitude completion ritual. Write a letter to a past pain acknowledging its hurt and thanking it for any lessons it offered, then ceremonially release the letter, burn or bury it, or tear it up. The physical act helps the mind recognize true release. Future anxiety is another form of clinging. Differentiate between productive planning, steps you can take, and unproductive worry, scenarios you mentally rehearse that you can't control. Ask, what action can I take right now to influence this situation? If nothing, intentionally release the worry and redirect attention to the present. Letting go in relationships means loving without trying to control others. Express needs and boundaries, but accept that others will choose as they will. Influence through example rather than emotional pressure. Letting go also applies to outdated identities. As you grow, old versions of yourself drop away. Letting go of a former self may feel disorienting, but it frees you to become who you truly are now. Each release creates space for new possibilities. Human beings are wired for connection. The quality of your relationships has more impact on your well-being than almost anything else. Positive relationships are a reservoir of strength, negative ones erode your peace. The core principle is taking full responsibility for your contribution to every interaction while releasing responsibility for how others respond. This shift moves relationships from transactional scoreboards to mutual creation. Empathetic listening changes interactions. Most people listen to reply rather than to understand. When someone shares, pause your internal script and genuinely seek to hear the emotions beneath their words. Simple phrases that reflect and invite, that sounds really hard. Tell me more, open space for processing rather than defensiveness. I learned this with my daughter. When I listened empathically instead of offering solutions, she felt heard and reached her own clarity. Generous interpretation is a relational skill. Assume positive intent when actions are ambiguous. When someone is late, consider delays rather than disrespect. When feedback lands hard, assume the intent is helpful rather than hurtful. This habit reduces unnecessary conflict and preserves goodwill without naivety. Vulnerability deepens connection. Sharing honest, restrained authenticity invites reciprocity and trust. You don't need to expose everything. Small consistent acts of genuineness, admitting uncertainty, expressing appreciation, naming a struggle, build intimacy. Boundaries remain essential here. Vulnerability doesn't require tolerating harm. Healthy relationships require clear limits. Boundaries aren't walls, they're clarity about what you will and won't accept. Communicate them calmly and consistently. Those who care will adjust, those who don't reveal their true priorities. One of the most powerful tools for shaping how you feel and perform is deliberate visualization. Your imagination isn't a toy, it's a training ground for your nervous system. Too many people use mental time travel to rehearse disasters, which primes anxiety, avoidance, and paralysis. But that same faculty can be repurposed to rehearse calm, confidence, and successful outcomes. Visualization isn't daydreaming, it's targeted mental practice that builds neural pathways similar to those created by actual experience. Athletes, musicians, and performers have long used this technique to sharpen skill under pressure. You can apply the same method to public speaking, difficult conversations, stressful meetings, or simply to create a calmer daily baseline. To visualize effectively, choose a specific scenario that usually triggers you and imagine it unfolding exactly how you'd like. Create a full sensory scene: what you see, what you hear, how your body feels, how you breathe, the words you speak, the expressions on other people's faces. The brain responds to richly detailed imagery as if it were real, so include tactile, auditory, and emotional details. Practice for 5 to 10 minutes daily, ideally at consistent times. Repetition matters more than length. Over time the rehearsal becomes a rehearsal for the real thing, making calm responses habitual rather than improvisational. Identity visualization magnifies the effect. Instead of picturing one event going well, imagine the person you want to be. How do they carry themselves? How do they react under stress? What routines do they keep? Spend time embodying that identity in your imagination until it feels plausible. When you repeatedly step into that mental identity, your behaviors start aligning with it. I coached someone who was terrified of stage time. Daily identity visualization of a poised, steady speaker gradually shifted their physiology and self-talk so the real presentations felt less threatening and more familiar. Create a mental sanctuary you can access anywhere. This is a vivid, safe interior space you build with intention, a secluded beach, a sunlit grove, a cozy cabin. Populate it with sensory details, temperature, scent, textures, sounds, then practice visiting it when you need calm. A 2-minute journey to your sanctuary can interrupt a stress spiral and give you breathing room to choose your next move. Besides building positive images, visualization can help you release negative energy. Imagine anger or fear as physical objects you can set down or transform. Picture stress dissolving into light, worry flowing out with each exhale, or resentment as pebbles you lay down and leave behind. These symbolic acts are not magical, but they help your mind enact release in a way your body recognizes. Daily habits are the scaffolding of a steady mind. The life you want is the accumulation of tiny choices repeated until they form identity. Most people overestimate the drama required to change and underestimate the power of incremental improvement. The idea of getting 1% better every day might sound small, but compound it over months and years and it becomes remarkable. Micro habits are the easiest path, actions so small you can't find a good excuse to skip them. If you want to meditate, begin with 1 minute. If you want to run, start with 5 minutes. If you want to write, open a page and write a single sentence. These minimal acts reduce resistance and build the habit scaffolding that makes larger changes possible. Start with margin, small rituals that create breathing room. A glass of water first thing in the morning, 3 deep breaths before checking messages, a short walk after lunch. These anchors stabilize your nervous system and signal that your day is guided, not tossed by whatever arrives. Replace automatic negative rituals with positive alternatives. If you scroll your phone as soon as you wake and it throws you into other people's priorities, create a sequence that happens first: hydrate, breathe, 5 seconds of gratitude. Over time the new sequence becomes the default, and the old, reactive habit fades. Most people try to stop bad habits through willpower alone and fail. A more effective approach is contextual redesign. Change the cues that trigger the behavior and build triggers for the new one. Make the desired action obvious, attractive, easy, and satisfying. Put a notebook by your bed to invite morning reflection. Leave your phone in another room to prevent immediate scrolling. Make the new habit simple enough that it feels doable even when you're tired. Mindful transitions are an underrated habit. Between tasks, take a breath, feel your feet on the floor, and set an intention for the next activity. These tiny pauses interrupt autopilot and help you show up with presence. 3 conscious breaths between meetings, before meals, or when switching from work to home life can dramatically reduce cumulative stress and improve focus. Gratitude practice in the form of appreciation scanning shifts attention from scarcity to abundance. Pause 3 times a day for 30 seconds and name something specific you appreciate in that moment. This isn't a stale checklist, it's moment-to-moment noticing. Over time your brain grows more sensitive to positive stimuli and less prone to grumbling about what's missing. Letting go remains one of the most challenging practices because it asks you to loosen control without becoming passive. Clinging to a fixed outcome narrows vision and reduces creative possibility. When you release rigid attachment to how something should unfold, you free up energy to notice alternatives and adapt. Letting go is not surrendering effort, it's changing the relationship to results so that your effort is flexible and responsive rather than desperate and frantic. Release the past by extracting lessons and dissolving the emotional charge. Write a letter to a painful episode acknowledging the hurt and the growth, then ceremonially let it go. The physical act, tearing, burning, burying, helps the nervous system register closure. For future anxieties, shift from catastrophic imagining to action-oriented planning. Ask, what step can I take right now to influence this outcome? If there's a concrete action, take it. If not, intentionally release the worry and return to the present. Relationships are a central arena for calm or chaos. Positive connections are one of the strongest predictors of well-being. Move away from transactional scorekeeping and adopt the practice of responsible contribution. Own your part in interactions without accepting responsibility for others' emotional states. When you take charge of your contribution, how you listen, what energy you bring, the clarity of your boundaries, interactions change. You stop expecting others to manage your mood and instead become a source of steady presence. Empathic listening rewires relational dynamics. Too often we listen to reply, which slams the brakes on real understanding. When someone speaks, slow down, soften your posture, tune into the feeling behind the words, and reflect back what you hear. Simple acknowledgements, "That sounds really hard, tell me more," create safety and reduce defensiveness. People rarely need immediate solutions, they need to be seen. Generous interpretations protect your peace. Defaulting to benevolent explanations for ambiguous actions prevents needless resentment. When someone acts in a way that could be hurtful, consider practical reasons: stress, distraction, a mistake, rather than assuming malice. This doesn't mean ignoring genuine problems, it means choosing an interpretation that preserves connection when it's reasonable to do so. Vulnerability deepens bonds. You don't need to overshare, share selectively and honestly. Admitting uncertainty, asking for help, or expressing appreciation are small acts of courage that invite reciprocity. Vulnerability grown within boundaries builds trust rather than trauma. Purpose and contribution give effort direction. When your day-to-day choices connect to something larger than ego, resilience and calm gain ballast. Purpose doesn't have to be monumental, it can be lived in small acts of service and integrity. Consider what energizes you, what injustices or needs pull at you, and where your skills meet those needs. Even modest acts, mentoring one person, doing your work with excellence, being reliably kind, accumulate into meaningful impact. When you adopt a contribution mindset, every interaction becomes an opportunity to make someone's day a little better. That perspective reduces self-centered worry and expands your sense of significance, which is energizing and stabilizing. Legacy thinking, how you want to be remembered, can be a compass for daily decisions, aligning small choices with long-term values. Finally, cultivate transcendent goals, aspirations that link personal growth with the well-being of others and the planet. These goals provide perspective and reduce the grip of immediate setbacks. They connect your life to larger patterns and help contextualize momentary discomforts as part of a broader journey. As you practice these approaches, visualization, micro-habits, mindful transitions, letting go, empathic listening, and purpose orientation, you rearrange the architecture of your inner life. The result isn't perfection, it's a steadying capacity to handle what life brings with more grace and agency. When you build these capacities, you don't merely survive turbulence, you become someone who navigates it with composure and uses it to deepen presence and purpose. One of the most overlooked engines of inner calm is the intentional design of your daily rituals. The routines you repeat form the framework of your emotional life. When your day is organized around purposeful, small actions, your nervous system learns a predictable rhythm and your mind is less likely to be hijacked by chaos. These routines don't need to be dramatic. The secret is consistency, simplicity, and alignment with who you want to become. Small deliberate choices repeated daily create identity changes far more effectively than sporadic bursts of willpower. Begin by choosing a handful of tiny, non-negotiable actions that signal the type of day you want to have. It might be as simple as drinking a full glass of water on waking, pausing for 5 deep breaths before opening your phone, or taking a 5-minute walk after lunch. These actions function like anchors. They interrupt autopilot and give your day structure. The power lies in the compounding effect. A minute of calm every morning builds into a baseline of steadiness that changes how you respond when stress arrives. The objective is not perfection but momentum. When you start with an easily achievable minimum, you make the practice dependable. On good days, you'll naturally expand the ritual. On hard days, the micro version keeps you connected and prevents a downward spiral. A critical component of habit success is designing your environment to support the behavior you want. Willpower is finite, cues are powerful. Place a journal and pen on your bedside table to invite evening reflection. Charge your phone in another room so the default upon waking isn't an avalanche of other people's priorities. Keep running shoes by the door to reduce friction for movement. Small Small changes in the landscape of your life change choices with minimal cognitive effort. Make the desired action obvious, easy, and attractive. This flips the psychological cost-benefit that usually sabotages intention. Another transformational habit is the practice of mindful transitions. Too many people move from task to task as if they're on a conveyor belt, carrying stress forward with each switch. Take 3 conscious breaths between activities to reset your nervous system and choose how you want to show up next. This pause shortens the distance between reactive autopilot and intentional presence. Do it before meetings, between parenting duties, or when switching from work to home. These micro breaks are free and highly effective. Cultivating an appreciation habit further reorients the mind from scarcity to abundance. At least 3 times a day, pause for 30 seconds and notice something specific you appreciate in that moment. This could be the rhythm of your breath, the warmth of sunlight on your skin, the way a coworker smiled, or the taste of your food. Naming the detail trains your attention to find positives you would otherwise miss. Over time, your baseline mood shifts because your brain begins to prioritize noticing the good. Equally important is replacing harmful default behaviors rather than trying to eliminate them by force. If checking your phone instantly triggers stress, don't try to merely stop, create an appealing alternative that occupies the same time and energy. Replace the scroll with a minute of conscious breathing, a quick gratitude glance in your journal, or a short stretch. The substitution strategy leverages momentum. It uses the same cue but redirects the response to a healthier pathway. Recovery rituals deserve the same intentional design. When you're depleted, small, consistent recovery acts shorten the suck time and restore capacity. For some, a walk in nature replenishes; for others, a creative outlet, a phone call with a safe friend, or a hot shower recalibrates the nervous system. Identify what works for you and schedule it as maintenance rather than waiting until you hit a crisis. Preventive care preserves performance and reserves emotional bandwidth for what matters. Letting go is both an art and a discipline. The human mind tends to cling to past grievances, to imagined futures, to identities that no longer fit. Letting go doesn't mean apathy. It means releasing the emotional attachment to an outcome while remaining fully engaged in the process of life. This distinction is crucial. You can strive passionately while holding results lightly. That mental flexibility opens the door to creativity and frees energy that was wasted on rigid control. To release the past, try an embodied ritual. Write a candid letter to the situation or person you're still carrying. Acknowledge the pain honestly. Note any lessons or growth that emerged, and then choose a symbolic act to mark release. Burn the paper if it's safe, bury it in the earth, or tear it up and discard the pieces. The physical gesture signals your nervous system that you are completing a process. The memory may remain, but its emotional charge diminishes, freeing you to focus on present possibilities. When anxiety about the future overwhelms you, move from worry to planning. Ask yourself, is there a practical step I can take right now to influence this outcome? If so, do it. If not, intentionally set aside the concern and return to present tasks. Create a short list of actionable steps you can take tomorrow or next week, then close that planning document and give yourself permission to rest. Productive planning honors responsibility. Worry is a mental loop that creates suffering without producing solutions. Relationships are where much of our emotional life is forged and tested. The quality of our connections often determines our resilience and well-being. Move away from transactional thinking toward the practice of contribution. Ask what you can bring to each interaction: clarity, kindness, presence, without making your self-worth contingent on the reciprocation you receive. This shift from receiving validation to offering steady contribution transforms both your experience and your influence. Empathic listening is the currency of meaningful connection. When someone speaks, slow your urge to respond with advice or defense. Instead, listen to the feeling behind the words and reflect it back. Simple phrases that acknowledge emotion and invite further sharing create safety. People often don't need immediate fixes, they need to be witnessed. When you provide that witness, you build trust and make it easier for others, and for you, to move toward constructive choices. Generous interpretation is a practical peacekeeper. Default to benevolent explanations when behavior is ambiguous. When someone misses your call, assume an ordinary cause like being busy or distracted rather than malicious intent. Generous interpretation reduces unnecessary conflict and preserves goodwill. It's not about naive optimism, it's a disciplined choice to protect your emotional economy. Boundaries and vulnerability are partners. Healthy connection requires both openness and limits. You can be genuine without being indiscriminate. Share your inner life with people who have earned the right to hear it. Protect your energy with clear, calm boundaries when behavior crosses your limits. Communicating what you will and will not accept, without shouting or moralizing, teaches others how to treat you. When boundaries are upheld consistently, relationships become more honest and less draining. Forgiveness is neither weakness nor a favor to others, it is a radical act of self-liberation. Holding grudges keeps you tethered to past harms and hands control of your emotional life to someone who likely does not care. Choose forgiveness as a strategy for your peace. That doesn't mean minimizing the harm or skipping accountability when necessary. It means deciding you will no longer be defined by the injury. Self-forgiveness is equally important. Take responsibility, make amends where possible, then free yourself to grow rather than punish indefinitely. Purpose and meaning anchor resilience. When your daily efforts align with a larger direction, setbacks are easier to contextualize and endure. Purpose doesn't require world-changing ambition. It can be showing up as a steady parent, a thoughtful colleague, or a compassionate neighbor. The key is aligning what you do with values that outlast immediate discomfort. Ask what energizes you, what problems you care about solving, and what small contributions you can make each day that point toward that larger aim. These micro-contributions add up into a life that feels coherent and worthwhile. Legacy thinking is a useful lens for everyday decisions. Imagine the person you want to become and ask what that person would do in this moment. This perspective helps you act from long-term wisdom instead of short-term impulse. It's a compass for choices that matter. Finally, remember that transformation is cumulative. The practices described here, tiny rituals, environmental design, mindful transitions, recovery routines, letting go, boundary setting, empathic connection, forgiveness, and purposeful action, are not isolated tips. Together they form an architecture for a life that cultivates calm and radiates positivity. You don't need to master everything at once. Choose one or two actions that feel doable and commit to them consistently for 30 days. Build momentum gradually and notice the small shifts. Over time those shifts become the fabric of how you live. Building mental resilience is a gradual, intentional process that transforms how you meet life's inevitable challenges. Think of resilience as a set of muscles you strengthen through repeated use rather than a fixed trait you're born with. Each strain and recovery adds to your capacity to bend without breaking. Start by noticing your default reactions to stress. Do you flee, freeze, or fight? Once you can observe your instinctive patterns, you can practice gentler, more effective responses. Small exposures to manageable stressors, volunteering for a slightly harder conversation, taking on a new task that scares you a little, or deliberately choosing a challenging but attainable goal, help expand your tolerance and confidence. Rather than rushing to remove all discomfort, intentionally stepping into tolerable uncertainty grows your ability to adapt. Cognitive flexibility is one of the most useful skills in resilience. It's the capacity to hold multiple perspectives, to test assumptions, and to pivot when new information appears. When an old strategy stops working, resisting change often prolongs suffering. Instead, treat your beliefs and habits as hypotheses to be experimented with, notice what results they produce and revise them when necessary. This science of adjustment is practical and liberating. It keeps you curious, reduces shame about mistakes, and invites creative problem solving. The people who thrive in shifting circumstances are rarely the ones who cling hardest to the past, they are the ones willing to learn, unlearn, and relearn. Meaning-making matters enormously. Hard experiences are easier to endure when you can connect them to a larger story or purpose. That doesn't mean forcing optimism or diminishing pain. Rather, look for how hardship might shape your skills, deepen your compassion, or prepare you for future service. When you reframe a setback as material for growth or as training for helping others, its sting often softens without being denied. This perspective also feeds your motivation to keep going, because you see your struggles contributing to something beyond immediate comfort. Emotional regulation requires tools and practice. Techniques like paced breathing, labeling feelings precisely, and using short physical rituals to shift state are all part of a practical toolkit. Labeling an emotion, saying silently "I'm feeling frustrated" or "I'm feeling overwhelmed," brings your thinking brain online and reduces the intensity of the feeling. Combined with a breathing pattern that lengthens the exhale, these simple acts calm the nervous system quickly and reliably. Build recovery rituals ahead of crises. Know what restores you and make those actions routine. When life knocks you down, familiar recovery habits help you return to functionality faster and with less internal drama. Visualization remains a potent lever. Use it to rehearse desired responses, to embody the identity you want, and to create quick, internal sanctuaries you can access anywhere. Daily short rehearsals of composed responses to stressful scenarios guide your body and mind toward those behaviors when the real moment arrives. Identity visualization, imagining and feeling like the person who naturally handles stress with balance, aligns your unconscious inclinations with your conscious aims. The nervous system learns by simulated experience almost as well as by real events, so consistent mental practice produces measurable shifts. Design your environment to support the person you intend to be. Habits are shaped not only by will but by context. Remove friction for positive actions and add friction to behaviors that undermine you. Make restorative practices visible and easy. Leave a journal on your nightstand, keep a water bottle by your desk, place a pair of walking shoes by the door. Conversely, create distance between you and triggers that drain you, like turning off notifications or creating tech-free zones. Small environmental nudges compound, making new behaviors simpler and defaulting your day toward steadiness. Practice generous interpretation and empathetic listening in relationships. Assume benevolent motives when actions are ambiguous and ask clarifying questions from curiosity rather than accusation. Listening attentively without rushing to improve or defend another person creates emotional space for both parties to be seen and understood. This approach reduces reactivity and promotes solutions rather than escalating conflict. When you consistently respond with presence instead of reflex, you teach others a different script for how interactions unfold, which often improves relational dynamics. Set clear boundaries and maintain them with kindness. Boundaries are not punishments. They are protocols for preserving your capacity to be generous and present over time. Communicate limits calmly and simply, and treat your own non-negotiables with the same respect you expect from others. Boundaries free you to invest energy where it matters rather than being drained by perpetual demands. When you consistently protect your margins, you become more dependable and effective in the roles you care about. Cultivate a gratitude practice that goes deeper than lists. Actively look for what challenges have taught you and what ordinary details you normally overlook. Write brief notes about specific moments that surprised you with value or joy. Over time, this habit trains your attention to locate advantages and lessons even in difficult conditions, shifting your baseline experience toward resilience and contentment. Reconnect regularly with movement and rest. Physical practices influence mood and cognitive flexibility. Gentle cardiovascular activity, stretching, and time outdoors reliably reduce stress hormone levels and increase mental clarity. Sleep and restorative rest, scheduled with the same respect you'd give an important appointment, are non-negotiable components of resilience. You cannot recover or adapt well when your body is deprived of regular, quality rest. Finally, anchor your days in a sense of contribution. Purpose and meaning make resilience sustainable. When your actions connect to something larger than short-term comfort, helping others, improving your community, expressing your talents in service, setbacks shrink in significance and endurance grows. This contribution need not be grand, steady, small acts of care and competence compound into a life that matters. As you practice these approaches, you'll notice a steady increase in your ability to remain composed under pressure, to extract growth from difficulty, and to show up for others with consistent calm. Keep the work simple, consistent, and compassionate toward yourself. Momentum builds one modest, courageous choice at a time. Another essential piece of staying calm and positive is learning how to manage your attention. Attention is the currency of experience. What you choose to focus on shapes what you feel, how you act, and the reality you perceive. Most people allow their attention to be hijacked by alerts, worries, and the next urgent demand, which primes reactive behavior and erodes inner calm. You can train attention like a muscle so that it becomes selective, stable, and purposeful. Start by noticing where your attention goes automatically. Do you drift to headlines that inflame you? Do you replay critical comments from others? Do you scan your phone when you should be present with a person or a task? Awareness of these default patterns is the first step. Once you see them, create small design choices to protect your focus, schedule blocks of uninterrupted time for deep work, turn off non-essential notifications, and create physical zones for different activities. When you build structures that make focused attention easier, your mind learns a new default. Practice attention anchors. Brief sensory or breath-based practices, applied consistently, can steady your mind in moments of turbulence. A simple anchor is a 3-breath reset: inhale fully, notice body sensations, exhale long and soft. Use this when you feel pulled into rumination or reactivity. Another anchor is a single sense scan: look around and name silently 3 concrete objects you can see, then return to the present task. These short practices break the chain of distraction and bring your nervous system back into balance. The way you direct attention also influences your energy. When you dwell on problems without pursuing solutions, your energy drains. When you direct attention toward actionable next steps, even small ones, you reclaim agency and reduce helplessness. Shift from a problem-saturated focus to a solution-oriented stance by asking, what is one small action I can take right now? Then take it. The momentum created by a tiny step often dissolves inertia and restores positive forward motion. Cultivate curiosity as an attention habit. Curiosity expands your perspective and reduces rigid defensive reactions. When someone behaves in a way that triggers you, approach it with the gentle question, what's going on for them right now? This stance transforms reactivity into inquiry, opening pathways for understanding and less draining interactions. Curiosity also applies to your internal life. Instead of labeling emotions as good or bad, explore them. Where do they show up in the body? What thought preceded them? What story am I telling myself? This investigative approach weakens the grip of automatic narratives and creates space for intentional choice. Another practice that dramatically affects attention is digital hygiene. The constant stream of social media, news, and messaging trains your brain to expect novelty and distraction, making sustained focus more difficult. Set clear rules for device use, designate tech-free windows, create a morning ritual without screens, and batch digital tasks so you check messages at specific times rather than constantly. Reducing fragmentation of attention leads to deeper work, better relationships, and a calmer baseline mood. Rest is critical for attention. Chronic fatigue erodes executive functions that manage focus and impulse control. Prioritize sleep and restorative pauses as essential parts of your productivity system rather than luxuries to be sacrificed. Short restorative breaks during the day, walks, micromeditations, or time outside, replenish attention and prevent depletion. Notice how a single 5-minute walk can reset your concentration and mood more effectively than forcing through exhaustion. Meaningful connection also anchors attention. When you are deeply present with another person, fully listening, reducing mental commentary, you create relational depth and mutual calm. Practice full presence in at least one interaction each day. Put away devices, soften your posture, and give your full ear. This practice not only strengthens bonds but also trains your attention to be generous rather than scattered. Managing attention is also linked to clarifying priorities. When you know what truly matters, it becomes easier to say no to distractions. Develop a short list of your highest priorities for the week and align daily tasks to those priorities. When an incoming demand competes with your priorities, ask, does this support my top commitments? If not, defer or decline. This disciplined filtering protects your attention and preserves energy for what moves you forward. Another powerful lever for calm and positivity is the intentional cultivation of optimism grounded in realism. Optimism is not naive positivity, it's an interpretive habit that looks for potential and solutions without denying reality. Realistic optimism recognizes obstacles while choosing to focus on opportunities and likely paths forward. You can train this habit by reframing setbacks as temporary and specific rather than permanent and global. When faced with a setback, ask, is this a reflection of my whole life or a localized challenge I can address? What resources do I have? Who can I ask for perspective or help? This practical optimism fuels action rather than immobilizing worry. Develop a regular practice of small wins. Celebrate micro-progress publicly or privately. These wins are attentional signposts that tell your brain the path you are on is producing results. They counter the tendency to discount incremental gains and keep motivation alive. A one-line journal noting small achievements each day is enough to maintain this upward spiral. Finally, connect attention management to your broader values. When your daily focus aligns with a deeper purpose, caring for family, contributing to your community, mastering a craft, attention feels meaningful rather than draining. Values provide a magnetic pull that orients choices and sustains focus when motivation fades. Revisit your values monthly and ask whether your current focus reflects them. Adjust as needed. Managing attention is neither mystical nor complex. It is a set of deliberate choices that shape what your mind rehearses and how it responds. Protecting your focus, practicing anchors, cultivating curiosity, enforcing digital hygiene, prioritizing rest, committing to meaningful presence, and orienting attention to values will transform how you experience each day. As your attention grows steadier, calm becomes more accessible, and positivity becomes the natural output of a mind trained to notice resourcefulness rather than scarcity. Integration is where transformation becomes real. You can learn powerful ideas and practice techniques in isolation, but their true value appears when they are woven into your daily life so seamlessly that they become the lenses through which you perceive and act. Integration means selecting a small number of practices that resonate, committing to using them consistently, and adjusting them to fit the contours of your actual day. It is better to reliably apply 2 practices than to sporadically attempt 10. The work is not intellectual accumulation, it is the patient, repeated application that changes nervous systems and habits. Begin by choosing a handful of anchors that cover different dimensions of your life, one to steady your mind, one to organize your time, one to nurture relationships, and one to restore energy. Make each anchor tiny and unmistakable. A breathing anchor in stressful moments, a short reflection each evening to convert experience into learning, a daily gesture of genuine appreciation towards someone close, and a simple recovery ritual like a short walk in fresh air can together create a basis of stability. The goal is coherence, not complexity. Over weeks these small acts compound, creating new default responses to tension and making presence and positivity the easier option. Design matters. Notice where friction sabotages your best intentions and reduce it. If reflection fails to happen because you forget or feel too tired, make it obvious, leave an open notebook where you sleep, set a short reminder at the same time, or pair the reflection with an existing habit like brushing your teeth. If you avoid movement because you lack time, adopt a micro-activity you can do in a doorway or during a break. Integration requires tending to the practical barriers as much as the inner commitments. Resilience increases when practice is matched with compassionate realism. Expect setbacks and view them as information rather than verdicts. When you skip a practice or react out of habit, notice what occurred without harshness. Ask what you learned about your triggers, context, or limits, and adjust the plan accordingly. This iterative approach prevents moralizing about consistency and replaces it with curiosity and refinement. Over time your system learns that misses are reparable, which lowers anxiety and increases willingness to try again. Communication is a core site for practical integration. Use brief, honest phrases to express needs and limits. When you ask for support, be specific about what would help and when. When you set boundaries, state them calmly and follow through. Clear communication reduces misinterpretation and preserves energy that would otherwise be spent guarding or explaining. Practice concise empathic language that names feelings and invites collaboration. This style of communication builds trust and reduces relational friction over time. Another practical integration is ritualizing transitions. Life moves fast, and moments of transition are when autopilot often regains control. Create consistent micro-rituals to mark boundaries between roles and spaces. A few breaths and a posture check before leaving your workstation, a brief gratitude note when you finish a task, or a short physical stretch before engaging with family are tiny markers that help you shift presence. These rituals are signals to your body and mind that one mode is ending and another is beginning, reducing carryover stress. Sustained progress depends on community and accountability. Share your intentions with one or two supportive people who can encourage you and hold you gently accountable. Communities of practice normalize ups and downs and provide practical ideas for adaptation. When you exchange experiences with others pursuing similar aims, you gain insights and the reassurance that change is gradual. Choose accountability partners who are steady rather than performatively intense. Consistency is the treasure here. If you struggle with motivation, return to purpose. Remind yourself why these practices matter. Connect each small habit to a larger aspiration, being more present for your children, showing up calmer at work, becoming someone others can rely upon in crisis. Motivation wanes when practices are disconnected from meaning. Relink habit tasks to the values that led you to begin in the first place so that the daily effort feels part of a coherent story of contribution. When triggers persist despite practice, deepen your curiosity rather than intensify discipline. Persistent reactions often indicate layered vulnerabilities, sleep debt, unprocessed grief, chronic stressors, or unresolved conflicts. Treat these as signals for deeper care rather than failures. Consider targeted support such as coaching, therapy, or structured peer work to investigate and heal entrenched patterns. Professional guidance is not a sign of weakness, it is an efficient way to resolve blocks that undermine everyday practice. Create redundancy in your recovery strategies so that if one method fails you have backups. If a long nature walk is impossible, use a 5-minute breathing sequence. If a journaling session is skipped, send a brief voice memo to yourself reflecting on one insight from the day. Redundancy prevents perfectionism from derailing momentum and ensures that relief remains accessible in tight schedules. Measure progress in lived experience rather than point goals. Notice whether your default emotional tone has shifted, whether you recover more quickly after stress, whether conversations feel less reactive and more generative, whether sleep quality improves, or whether small pleasures register more vividly. These qualitative changes are the real metrics of success, and they compound in ways that quantitative checklists often miss. For those creating content or leading communities, engagement depends on authenticity and utility. Share struggles alongside strategies. Audiences connect with real human process more than polished outcomes. Offer practical, repeatable steps that listeners can try immediately rather than abstract pep talks. Encourage listeners to experiment for a fixed period, say 30 days, and to reflect on specific changes. This approach increases watch time and builds trust because people see the practice as accessible and relevant to their lives. Sustainability means integrating rest as an ethical act. Treat restorative practices not as rewards for productivity but as foundational. Regular rest reduces burnout risk and keeps your capacity to care for others intact. Schedule rest and honor it as non-negotiable. When your own needs are met, your ability to contribute and remain calm amplifies dramatically. Finally, remember that transformation is relational. Your inner change ripples outward, shifting how others experience you, and often altering the social dynamics around you. When you cultivate steadiness and choose contribution, people respond differently, relationships become less reactive and more generative. The change you pursue is not solitary work but a form of civic kindness that improves the environments you inhabit. As you approach the final stretch of this practice, focus on consistency and gentle escalation. change accumulates quietly. When you commit to small, steady acts, breathing before reacting, pausing between tasks, choosing a micro-habit each morning, you create a new baseline for how stress interacts with your nervous system. These small patterns build momentum, one modest choice after another reorients both biology and habit. Resist the urge for dramatic overhaul and favor gradual, sustainable growth. The most resilient people I've known didn't transform overnight, they showed up repeatedly, imperfectly, and with curiosity. One of the most catalytic shifts you can make is learning to frame setbacks as feedback rather than verdicts. When something goes wrong, a conversation that escalates, a missed deadline, a stubborn emotional trigger, notice it with compassion and curiosity. Ask what the episode is teaching you about boundaries, preparation, or habitual responses. Extract one practical adjustment and try it once. This feedback loop is how wisdom is built. Over time you'll develop a repertoire of small course corrections that keep you moving forward without catastrophic self-judgment. The habit of iterative improvement converts friction into learning and anxiety into actionable steps. Another high-impact habit is nurturing what I call presence currency. Presence currency is the emotional capital you build by being reliably available and attentive to people and tasks. It's earned in small moments, showing up on time, listening without interrupting, completing what you promised, offering a brief note of appreciation. These deposits create trust reserves that cushion you when conflict or stress arises. People who have strong presence currency experience less turbulence in relationships because their goodwill balances inevitable mistakes. Cultivate this bank account with modest, consistent deposits rather than grand gestures that are rare and hard to sustain. Learn to celebrate tiny wins in practical ways. When you complete a short practice, 5 breaths before a meeting, a micro-meditation, a brief journaling period, notice it and acknowledge yourself. This internal recognition might be a single sentence in your reflection journal or a mental nod that registers the action as meaningful. These micro-celebrations teach your brain to associate small efforts with satisfaction, which makes repetition more likely. The accumulation of small wins keeps motivation alive more reliably than waiting for large milestones. Deepen your recovery toolkit by diversifying the types of restoration you use. Physical recovery includes movement and sleep, emotional recovery includes connection and expressive outlets, cognitive recovery includes novelty and learning, and spiritual recovery includes practices that connect you to a sense of meaning beyond yourself. When stress accumulates, having a range of restorative options prevents dependence on any single method that might not always be available. If a long hike is impossible, a 5-minute breath sequence or a short creative activity can deliver meaningful restoration. This pragmatic flexibility ensures you always have access to some form of recovery, even during busy weeks. As you refine practices, pay attention to the language you use with yourself and others. Words shape perception. Replace catastrophic phrases with precise observations. Instead of "I always ruin everything," try "I made a mistake here and I can take one step to improve." Replace global labels such as never and always with time-bounded descriptors that invite action. When speaking to others, use statements that name your experience without assigning intention. "I felt hurt when that happened," rather than "you always ignore me." This communicative style reduces defensiveness and fosters constructive dialogue because it focuses on experience and needs rather than judgment and blame. Engage in periodic audits of your life with compassionate curiosity. Every few months, take a longer moment, an hour or an evening, to evaluate what's working and what isn't. Look at your routines, relationships, energy patterns, and commitments. Identify one habit to strengthen and one to reduce. Make adjustments that are simple and specific. Shift bedtime earlier by 15 minutes, move phone charging out of the bedroom, schedule a weekly check-in with a friend. These mini audits prevent drift and keep your practices aligned with the evolving demands of your life. Return regularly to the question of purpose. Purpose is not a distant mountain peak you must summit before you can be content. It is a compass that informs daily choices. Revisit what matters to you and connect small actions to that orientation. When your micro-habits align with a larger narrative, supporting family, offering kindness in your work, cultivating wisdom, consistency becomes easier because each choice feels meaningful. Purpose amplifies resilience because it supplies reason when effort feels thin. When relationships feel tense, prioritize repair over righteousness. The instinct to be right often fuels conflict and prolongs disconnection. Repair begins with curiosity, a willingness to listen, and a clear expression of your own experience. Use brief statements that acknowledge the other person's feelings and your part in the interaction. Even small acts of repair, a sincere "I'm sorry," a clarifying question, a short acknowledgement of hurt, can rapidly reduce escalation and restore connection. Prioritizing repair doesn't mean ignoring boundaries, it means choosing connection when it's possible and wise, which preserves both closeness and personal safety. Practice ritualized closure for days that felt chaotic. Before bed, take a few minutes to reflect: what went well, what could have been different, and one small intention for tomorrow. Write or record a brief note. This ritual signals completion to your nervous system and prevents the accumulation of unfinished business that fuels late-night rumination. Over time, this habit reduces the mental clutter that often makes sleep elusive and mornings reactive. Keep seeking opportunities to learn and to teach. Knowledge alone is not transformation, but engaged learning combined with consistent practice accelerates growth. Share what you discover with one or two people. Teaching what you practice cements your habits and spreads value. When you explain a simple breathing technique to a friend or model a boundary with calm, you reinforce your own commitment and offer others a pathway to steadiness. As you near the end of this sequence, choose 2 practices to carry forward for the next 30 days. Make them specific, measurable, and tiny enough to be non-negotiable. For example, before every work session, take 3 breaths. Each evening, write 1 sentence about a lesson from the day. Commit publicly to a trusted person if that helps your follow-through. After 30 days, reassess and layer in a new micro-habit. This slow accretion of change is how durable transformation is built. Finally, remember that your work matters beyond your own relief. When you cultivate calm and positivity, you change the field in which others live. You create a ripple effect: calmer parents raise calmer children, grounded leaders shape healthier workplaces, compassionate neighbors soften community tensions. Your practice is both personal and social. By choosing to be steadier, you contribute to a less reactive world. Keep showing up, keep refining, and keep practicing with patience. Your future calm is composed of the tiny consistent acts you make today. Now you've reached the finish line of this series, but this is where the real work begins. Everything you've read so far becomes powerful only when translated into steady practice. The techniques are not a checklist to complete once, they are a way of living that shifts your nervous system, habits, and relationships over time. The secret is patient consistency, small, non-negotiable acts repeated daily until they reshape your default responses. Choose 2 tiny practices to anchor your routine and commit to them for 30 days. Make them so manageable that resistance collapses: 1 breath before a meeting, 1 minute of reflection before bed, a glass of water first thing in the morning. When a habit is that small, you almost can't fail, and what begins small will slowly expand into richer practice without forcing it. As you integrate, measure success by lived experience rather than perfection. Notice whether you recover more quickly after stress, whether your conversations lose their reactive edges, whether your sleep improves, or whether you feel more engaged in small pleasures. These qualitative shifts are the real markers of change, and they compound. Keep a brief nightly note of 1 thing that went well and 1 small adjustment you'll try tomorrow. This gentle loop turns experience into insight, and insight into action, while protecting you from moralizing or harsh self-judgment when progress is uneven. If you want to increase engagement with the content you create or the way you show up publicly, frame your practices in human terms. People respond to honest process more than polished outcomes. Share 1 small vulnerability and 1 practical tip in the same short piece of content. The mix of relatability and utility holds attention. Invite listeners to try a concise experiment for 7 days and report back. A small challenge creates a sense of camaraderie and reason to return. Structure episodes around real moments of practice. Show the ritual, narrate the felt change, and offer a tiny prompt listeners can try immediately. For creators building a following, consistent, accessible value combined with authentic humanity builds trust and watch time. Mentioning a trusted source or channel in a way that fits naturally can help discoverability. For example, I sometimes reference content partnerships with Momentum Audiobooks when recommending resources that align with the practices I teach. Keep promotion light and integrated with usefulness so it feels like a service rather than an interruption. When obstacles appear, and they will, respond with curiosity rather than condemnation. Persistent resistance often points to unmet needs or mismatches between practice and life context, sleep debt, unresolved grief, chronic stressors, or unhelpful environments. Treat these as data. Adjust practices to fit reality. If morning routines fail because your job starts earlier than expected, shift the anchor to an evening ritual. If long meditations feel impossible, do 3 mindful breaths instead. If a relationship triggers old patterns, bring compassionate curiosity to what's really being activated rather than doubling down on strategy alone. When necessary, enlist support. Coaching, therapy, or steady peer groups accelerate progress by helping you uncover blind spots and build tailored strategies. Asking for help is not weakness, it's strategic scaling. Remember the importance of redundancy. Build multiple, layered recovery options so you always have accessible ways to reset. If a hike isn't possible, have a 2-minute breath sequence ready. If journaling is skipped, toss a quick voice memo to yourself summarizing a key lesson from the day. Redundancy prevents all-or-nothing thinking and keeps momentum alive when life gets complicated. Tune into your relationships as both a testing ground and a resource. The skills you cultivate, empathic listening, generous interpretation, calm boundary setting, are forged most effectively in real interactions. Practice repair when conflicts arise. A short, sincere acknowledgement of hurt and a willingness to clarify moves relationships from stalemate back toward connection. Prioritize small acts of generosity that accumulate into presence currency, timely responses, brief appreciations, showing up when you say you will. These deposits create relational resilience that cushions you through inevitable rough patches. Keep expanding your definition of purpose. Purpose is not only monumental achievements, it is the pattern of small, meaningful contributions you make consistently. Look for ways to align daily actions with a larger narrative, mentoring someone, improving an aspect of your workplace, caring for your community, creating something that helps others feel seen. When work connects to contribution, resilience grows because your effort matters beyond immediate comfort. Legacy thinking can guide small decisions. What would the person you want to become do in this moment? Use that as a compass for everyday choices. Cultivate a habit of periodic audit with kindness. Every 3 months, take an hour to review what's working and what isn't. Look at routines, relationships, energy patterns, and commitments. Pick one habit to tighten and one to loosen. Make adjustments small and specific. This practice prevents drift and keeps your life aligned with your evolving priorities. Use the audit to celebrate small wins and to re-anchor purpose. It's both calibration and celebration. Protect restful margins as a core discipline. Rest is not indulgence, it's the foundation of performance and presence. Schedule restorative time like an appointment and honor it. Quality sleep, short restorative breaks, and weekly rituals that replenish are non-negotiable if you want sustained calm and the capacity to contribute. When you deprioritize rest, your emotional bandwidth shrinks and your ability to act from values diminishes. As your practice deepens, the horizon shifts from self-regulation to contribution. When you cultivate inner steadiness, you change the field around you. Families, teams, and communities respond to calmer presences. You become a stabilizing force, and that ripple multiplies. This expansive view keeps practices meaningful. Your inner work becomes a public good that improves the relational climate wherever you move. Finally, be tender with yourself. Growth is nonlinear and often slow. You will take 2 steps forward and 1 step back. Celebrate the forward steps and study the setbacks without self-condemnation. The people who sustain change are not those who never fail, they are those who return to practice with patience and curiosity. Keep the work simple and sustainable. Choose a few anchors, honor them daily, and let the compound effect do the heavy lifting. Your future calm is composed of present small choices. Start today with something tiny, repeat it tomorrow, and repeat it the day after. Over weeks and months, you will look back and hardly recognize the agitation you once carried as normal. You will have cultivated steadiness, clarity, and a capacity to contribute that extends beyond your own comfort. Keep showing up. The world needs people who can remain calm in chaos and radiate positivity in struggle. Your practice matters.